Hello, welcome back to the Genesis cycle. Today we're on Genesis chapter 18. So let's go ahead and get into this. Then Yahweh appeared to him by the terebinth trees of Mamre as he was sitting in the tent door in the heat of the day. I love this, the description. This is classic Bronze Age, late Bronze Age, which is the setting of the patriarchs. And he's just sitting there in the tent door. They didn't have fans, they didn't have AC, right? So he lifted his eyes and looked, and behold, three men were standing by him. And when he saw him, he saw it. He ran from the tent door to meet them and bowed himself to the ground and said, "My Lord, if I have now found favor in your sight, do not pass on by your servant." So this is interesting. Abraham, we can now talk about Abraham. He's speaking in the singular person. And throughout this entire narrative, it's not clear whether he's talking to one person or three persons. Sometimes it seems like there's Yahweh with two other people who are angels, or like all three of these people are angels or messengers, divine beings, and together they represent Yahweh who is up in heaven. Scholars have said, well, what you have is two different traditions, and our editor, our narrator has combined the two traditions into one story. I don't think it really matters very much. The point is that here we have a really interesting literary characteristic of a lot of the narratives in the Torah, then also in Judges. Like we have this also with Gideon, when the angel of the Lord comes to Gideon. At first it's the angel of the Lord speaking, but then all of a sudden it's God himself who is speaking, and it kind of goes back and forth, and it's not really clear. Are we talking about, is this an icon of the Holy Trinity, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, all of them together representing Yahweh? This would be a common thought in sort of like Eastern Orthodox iconography. Anyway, what's clear is that these are representative, or they are the presence, or one of them is the presence of God Almighty. "My Lord, if I have now found favor in your sight, do not pass on by your servant. Please let a little water be brought, and wash your feet, and rest yourselves under the tree. I will bring a morsel of bread, that you may refresh your hearts. After that you may pass by, inasmuch as you have come to your servant." And then they said, "Do as you have said." So this is classic, typical hospitality. And you would have found this, you still will find this today among like nomads and things like this in parts of the Near East. So Abraham hurried into the tent to Sarah and said, "Quickly make ready 3 measures of fine meal needed." And then also they get a good calf and they get butter. So I remember reading this years ago when I was younger and thinking, good grief, this is not a realistic story. This would take hours to do. You have to go find a calf. You have to kill it. You have to drain it of its blood. Then you have to butcher it, and you have to make a fire. You have to roast it. And I didn't realize at that time, many years ago, that would have been normal. So these guys are presumably just sitting around, maybe having a little bit of bread that already had been made, having some water to refresh themselves, with Abraham, presumably for hours and hours, because the process of doing all of this would have taken, I want to say, at least 2 hours, probably quite a bit more. And of course they are under the tree. Then they said to him, "Where is Sarah, your wife?" Now this is interesting. So Sarah, today, if you come to visit someone's house, even if the wife is cooking, she's going to come out and say hi. This would probably not have been the case back then. So the fact that they even know Sarah's name is kind of strange. This already is kind of giving us a hint that this is not a regular story. These are not 3 just regular guys who happen to be traveling by. Why would they know his wife's name? This would not have been a common thing for them. Maybe to have heard of the patriarch Abraham, maybe to have heard of Lot. Like, okay, these are important men, but how do they know Sarah's name? So he said, "Here in the tent." And again, she would have been cooking and preparing the food, but she would not have come out to say hi to them. That would not have been the custom. And he said, "I will certainly return to you according to the time of life, and behold, Sarah, your wife, will have a son." So here again, it is the singular. So again, what is this? Is this one of these guys represents Yahweh, or is Yahweh, and the other 2 are just angels? Again, we have a combination of different things. And then here we have the second story of laughing. Remember, we have all these pairs, all these doublets throughout the entire Abraham cycle. And this is one of them. The first one, Abraham laughs, and here's the second one where Sarah laughs. Now, Abraham and Sarah were old. This is all stuff that we know. We've read this in Genesis 12, but our narrator is going to repeat it. And Sarah had passed the age of childbearing. Therefore Sarah laughed within herself, saying, after I have grown old, shall I have pleasure, my Lord being old also. I think this is a really unfair thing. We kind of assume that Abraham is the one who's like, oh, it's a laughter of faith. Oh, I can't believe that God is going to do this. What a wonderful thing. Whereas Sarah is the one having a laughter of disbelief. At this point, we also have to ask, has Sarah heard anything from Abraham? All of these things up until now, God has spoken to Abraham. God has spoken to Hagar. But we don't have any record of God having spoken to Sarah. So we have this question. We don't actually know. The narrator doesn't actually tell us. Again, as I mentioned in a previous talk, we can kind of infer, we would think that Abraham had told her, but we don't actually know that. So maybe she's laughing because this is the first time that she's heard of this plan that she's supposed to have this child in her old age, and she thinks that this plan is silly or ridiculous, unrealistic. Which it is silly. It is kind of ridiculous. It is unrealistic, according to the way that humans look at things. So I mean, we shouldn't be too rough on Sarah. I think we do that a lot with the Bible. We're really generous in kind of excusing the men of God who do things that are kind of questionable, but then we're kind of over eager maybe to attribute negative emotions or negative motives to some of the women. It's just a thought for you to take. And the Lord said to Abraham, why did Sarah laugh? Okay, so here is secret knowledge, okay, because she laughs within herself. This is kind of like chuckling within her heart. We've all had that experience. We hear something funny and we kind of are laughing, but we don't laugh out loud. LOL. Lol, as my kids say, they say lol. It's I don't know. These kids are weird. Anyway, is anything too hard for the Lord? And so here we're getting more and more of kind of the indication that these are not just regular visitors. Again, every little thing, it's kind of clues upon clues. And somehow Yahweh, again in verse 13, and then Yahweh said to Abraham, oh, okay, well, I guess it's just Yahweh who's right there. One of the J sources, one of the Yahweh sources, where Yahweh is like, oh, let's go down to the tower and see what they're doing. And Yahweh was walking through the garden and said, Adam, where are you? Like one of these types of stories that we have throughout Genesis. Is anything too hard for Yahweh? And this is interesting because Yahweh, and have you ever talked to a person and they do this and like, oh yeah, Dwayne is very upset today. Dwayne is hungry, but you're talking with me. And I'm like, why are you talking about yourself in the third person? This is not a normal way of talking. Well, anyway, this is part of the kind of mysterious nature of this text. Then Yahweh says, is anything too hard for Yahweh? He doesn't say, is anything too hard for me? No, he says, is anything too hard for Yahweh? So again, this is just part of the complicated, kind of ambiguous, mysterious nature of this text. Who are these people? Is one of them Yahweh? Are they all speaking on behalf of Yahweh? Do they all together represent Yahweh? Is Yahweh in heaven and these are messengers? We have indications in the different verses that any or all of these may in fact be the case. So we end up without one clear answer. But Sarah denied it, saying, I did not laugh, for she was afraid. Okay, so she's getting like, these guys know my name. They know about me. What's going on here? And then, of course, they're invoking Yahweh. Is anything too hard for Yahweh? And so she's afraid. And he said, no, but you did laugh. And of course, laugh is where we get Yitzhak, which is the name of the child of the promise. So we have these two stories that go back to laughter, that give an etiology and an etymology. Why do we have Grandpa, why do we have a patriarch, an ancient patriarch that has this weird name, laughter? He laughs. Why do we have, how does that make sense? Exalted father, thumbs up. He laughs. What? He wrestles with God. What? Trickster, Jacob, deceiver. What? Okay, these are weird names for the patriarchs of your people. Other than Abraham. Thumbs up. Okay, but Sarah denied it. Okay, so this is the first section that we have here. And we have this hospitality, and then this is going to be contrasted with the lack of hospitality we're going to see in the next chapter, when two of these men, creatures, beings, whatever they are, we don't really know, like I said, when they go to Sodom, where they do not receive hospitality. Okay? So again, we have all these doublets, but here it's a contrast. Here they receive hospitality. Next time they don't receive hospitality. Here, There is a promise of blessing. I will return to you. You will have a child. The child has to be through Sarah. It's not going to be through Hagar. We already saw this before. But then on the following one, because there's a lack of hospitality, because these men are treated poorly, men, celestial beings, whatever they are, they're treated poorly. What follows is not blessing, but what follows is destruction. This is a very classic way of putting together short stories in Hebrew and just ancient Near Eastern and Middle Eastern literature. So we're done with that section. Here, I mean, in terms of application, we learn about the blessing of hospitality. He didn't know these people. He ran out to welcome them. When else do we have a person running out to welcome someone? It's the father who is running out to welcome his son who has come back from being in the land of pork and prostitutes, the land of the Gentiles. So we have that in the New Testament. It's usually called the parable of the prodigal son. It's a bad name. It's really should be called the parable of the son in the field, because it's really about the son who's out in the field and whether or not he's going to come back into the house and rejoice that his brother who was dead is now alive. But anyway, Christians have not been very good at interpreting scripture over the years. So anyway, let's move on. So then we have the second one. And here we have an answer to a mysterious question. Abraham is called a prophet. Now, the key word, the key work of the prophets in the Old Covenant is to call people to be faithful to their covenant with God, and mostly for the prophets that we know what are called the literary prophets. Isaiah, Ezekiel, Zechariah, Malachi. These guys. That is the Mosaic covenant mostly, and so we've already read about how the men in the household of Abraham were circumcised. That was the sign of the covenant, or the sacrament of the covenant. So that was kind of a physical way of calling them to be faithful into entering into the covenant. And here we have the second great work of a prophet in the Bible, including the New Testament, which is to intercede for the people. The idea that prophets are primarily about kind of talking about the future. Every now and then, occasionally, they'll give warnings that are related to the future, but this is not the main role of prophets in either the New Covenant or the Old Covenant. So here we have him interceding for the people. We have many examples. Moses will intercede for the people. Isaiah will identify with the sins of his people. Isaiah 6, I am a man of unclean lips. I come from a people of unclean lips. When Moses says, God says, I will destroy these people and I will make of you a great nation. And Moses says, no, think about your reputation, God. And then God relents and he says, okay, well, I guess I'm not going to destroy them. So this idea of interceding for the people, we have many more examples. I'm not going to go into those. Of interceding for the people is a really key core role of the prophets in the Old Covenant, in the New Covenant too. But prophets are less. We know a lot less about prophets in the New Covenant than in the Old Covenant. But here we have an answer, a partial answer to how is this Abraham fellow a prophet? Well, he did the whole circumcision thing, was related to covenant. He didn't preach. He didn't leave an oracle. So like this stuff that we do associate with prophets, we don't find. He didn't do miracles like Elisha and Elijah. So that's another thing that we associate with prophets. Not all of them, but some of them at least. So we have this kind of hovering question. How can we call Abraham a prophet? Well, here's another piece of evidence in favor of his role as a patriarch, at least having a prophetic element. He's going to intercede for Sodom. Then the men rose from there and looked towards Sodom, and Abraham went with them to send them on the way. So this is nice. It's kind of like, I'll go to you at the airport, or I'll go with you to the airport so you can take off. I'll go with you to the train station. And Yahweh said, shall I hide from Abraham what I am doing, since Abraham shall surely become a great mighty nation, and all the nations of the earth shall be blessed in him. So again, this is kind of like the narrator saying, hey guys, I said this before, but just in case you don't remember that part of the story from a few weeks ago, I'm going to say it again. He's going to be a great nation. For I have known him, in order that he may command his children and his household after him, that they keep the way of Yahweh. Of course, this is Yahweh talking, and to keep again, speaking of himself in the third person again, the way of Yahweh may bring to Abraham that he has spoken to him. This is Yahweh speaking. Yahweh is thinking to himself, and he's talking of himself as he. Again, This is just throughout this entire chapter, and we find it again in other parts of Torah. It's just how the literature is. And Yahweh said, because the outcry against Sodom and Gomorrah is great, and because their sin is very grave, I will go down now. Go down, we know that. We have that verb from, or the idea at least, from the Tower of Babel. Let's go down and see what they're doing. I will go down now. And see whether they have done altogether according to the outcry against it that has come to me. And now he's speaking in the first person again, to me. And if not, I will know. Very Yahwistic. Like, well, let's go down there and see what's actually going on in Sodom and Gomorrah. Then the men turned away from there and went towards Sodom, but Abraham still stood before Yahweh. Okay, so do two of the guys go down there, and one of the guys is Yahweh now, and he's the one who stays there with Abraham? Who knows? And Abraham came near and said, would you also destroy the righteous with the wicked? Now, here is the main theological and ethical question here. This is what we call communal judgment. If you have a group of people that are largely guilty of something, is it okay to punish them all? We ask these questions all the time about stuff. Like, we ask these questions about, in World War II, the carpet bombing of, was it Dresden? One of the cities in Germany that it was a large industrial plant, and where they were making, bombs and munitions and planes and the stuff that was killing people in England and France and other places. And the question is, well, we know that we're going to kill probably some innocent people, some children and some non-combatants, but this is the only way that we have of saving the lives, by getting rid of this material that is going to be used for killing other people and for furthering the war. Like, is this okay? The nuclear bomb at Hiroshima and Nagasaki. These are ethical questions. I'm not telling you that I have an answer to them, but I'm just saying that these really are profound ethical questions. And here we have it all the way back in the setting of the Bronze Age, with Abraham talking, apparently, in some way, shape, or form, with Yahweh. But Abraham stood before Yahweh, and Abraham came near and said, would you also destroy the righteous with the wicked? Suppose there were 50 righteous within the city. Would you also destroy the place and not spare it for the 50 righteous that were in it? Far be it from you to do such a thing as this, to slay the righteous with the wicked, so that the righteous would be as the wicked. Far be it from you. Shall not the judge of all the earth do right? So Yahweh said, if I find inside Sodom 50 righteous within the city, then I will spare all the places for their sake. So, like, this idea that even if there's only a few righteous, I will spare the entire city. And then he keeps on going down. Abraham is very humble. Who am I but dust and ashes? Is going back to, from the earth, from the dust you were made, to the dust you will return. This is in Genesis 3, I want to say, Genesis 2. And of course, this is the famous verse that we use during Ash Wednesday to remind us of the mortality of the human being. And then he goes, suppose there were 5 less than 50. And he keeps on kind of bartering down. It says, suppose there's only 30. And the Lord says, I would not do it for 30. Then he keeps on going down for the sake of 20. Then he said, Lord, or let not the Lord, and here Lord is not Yahweh, let not the Lord, it's Adonai, it's not necessarily a religious term. It would be like, this is the Lord of the mansion, or this is the Lord of the castle. Okay, it's a man of respect, of power, of authority over a certain place. So here we don't have Yahweh anymore. Then he said, let not the Lord be angry, and I will speak but once more. Suppose 10 should be found there. So this is like the bartering, right? I love this bartering that we have. And then God said, I will not destroy it for the sake of 10. So Yahweh went his way as soon as he had finished speaking with Abraham, and Abraham returned to his place. And that's the end. So we end up with the question, well, why 10? Why doesn't he go down to 5 or down to 1? And ultimately, we don't have an answer for this. What we have is a recognition that God is very much concerned with saving the just and saving the righteous. Even if there are very few of them, he wants to save them. He wants to preserve them. And if there are many wicked, but only a few righteous, he will take that into account. However, we get to a level where it actually becomes personal. So I guess this, if we want to theologically look at this, this is where it gets personal, right? We go from an abstract thing like, well, what if there's 50 or what if there's 30, or like we go from like an abstract thing like that, and then we get down to just a handful of people, and then God, instead of continuing on with this theoretical discussion, and then Abraham, instead of continuing to push, well, what if there's 7, or what if there's 5, or what if there's 3, or what if there's only 1, like he doesn't keep on going with that. He kind of seems to realize, like, okay, I've got down to 10, which would be the size of back then a medium, or really a small family, to be honest. And he said, okay, wow, so even if there's only one family. And then God does something personal. Instead of saying, okay, well, we had this nice philosophical conversation, so I'm going to go back to the heavenly court, and Abraham, you go back to the oaks of Mamre and your tents and your servants, and eat the rest of the leftover of the goat or the sheep or whatever we had. God is going to go in there to Sodom and to actually save the family, that one righteous family. And he is going to take the initiative to do that. And of course, as Christians, we see this in terms of the incarnation of Christ, that yes, many, many have fallen away, many, many have gone astray, but for the sake of the few, for the sake of the remnant, for the sake of the elect, you can use whatever words you want from the Old Testament, from the New Testament. God is going to take the initiative to go into Sodom and to deliver those who will be there in spite of the violence of the city of man, in spite of the violence that God knows that he will encounter there in the human city. And it's a great way of talking about the incarnation. In spite of the violence that God knew would confront his word made flesh in Jesus Christ, he sent him into the city to deliver those who would listen. And then, even then, we have, and we'll get to this down the road with the following chapter, which is also very interesting. But then down the road, we get to the fact that even of the people who have been delivered, one of them looks back. But we'll get to there next week. The discussion questions are below. Please, I hate to say this, I sound like such a YouTuber now, but please like and share, leave a comment. It does help it. Because honestly, I've been listening to a lot of stuff on YouTube, and the good biblical scholarship on YouTube, not so much. A lot of kind of cheesy boomer sermons all over the place. Good biblical scholarship, not so easy to find. Anyway, God bless you all, and thank you for being part of the Abraham Cycle study.